I think we are live. Okay. Let me know if you can hear me in the chat. All right. Hello there, Adam Bowley, Britboy, Philip Budzik, Sam Patton, Gabriel Petkov, Aguado Verbigracia, Ramirez, not going to bother trying to say that whole name. Jesus. Gabriel Petkov, Lindsay. Hello there, Lindsay Manning, Philip Budzik. All right. Okay, well, what's cataloging a library? Well, to catalog a library is basically, I'm going to go through my library of books, which is over here in this direction, and basically put them down in an Excel file, more or less. Though I guess this is technically Google's version of Excel, and it's not technically called Excel, but everyone knows that it's Excel. Hi there, everybody. All right, sounds like people can hear. Fantastic. All right. So here's what's going to happen. Let's see. Where is it? Oh, yeah, here it is. And transition. All right. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going through my library. I probably won't get through everything. But what's going to happen is here I have this Google Sheets, the Casual Historian Library. This sheet will be made available to patrons after the stream. And to become a patron, go to patreon.com/casualhistorian. $1 will get you access to this and all the other $1 perks, such as an upcoming Discord server. But for now, so what we're going to end up doing is I go through the library, shelf by shelf, add the books and the pieces of information I'm looking for my spreadsheet here. The titles of books, obviously, the author, the year they were published, and which section of my library they are in. And then those are the most important ones. The fifth section is the archive URL, which basically I'm going to be going through the Internet Archive and finding which of these books are available for free there. The purpose of that is to prioritize, like, if I ever need to get rid of some books for one reason or another, maybe I'm moving, maybe I'm just trying to downsize or something, then you prioritize the books that are available for free on Internet Archive. Yeah, and so while I'm doing this, I'll be taking questions from you guys. And so with that, let me turn on some tunes here. I've got a playlist here on Epidemic Sound, so hopefully this isn't too loud for you guys. All right. Well, let's see. Champarte asks, are you going to do this alphabetical order or by author order? Well, I'm going to be doing this by whatever order they are currently in my library. See, right now, my library, I organize everything by sort of like what year, or no, sorry. I organize it by subject section. So like I have a section for American history. I have a section for like European history, Middle East history, and all that stuff. And then I have each of those individual sections organized chronologically. So at the top of the bookshelf, like I have one whole bookcase for American history, and the top of the bookcase is earliest American history, so colonial period stuff. And then towards the bottom, I have more recent or present work. Let's see, someone's asking what guitar is that back there behind me. That is an acoustic from, let me double check here. Yeah, so this is a Squier Fender acoustic. I've had this since I was probably like 16. Yeah, so maybe I'll do something with that at some point in the future, but not today. And so, I'm going to put this guitar away and grab my first stack of books and we'll get started. So yeah, can you guys hear the music all right? Is it too loud, too soft? Just right? All right. All right, let's get a few questions here. Didymus, can you do a video debunking Walt Disney being an anti-Semite? I could if I wanted to do the research into that, but currently it's not one of my interests. And you always need to be careful about presuming things, because, you know, you might come across something you don't like. Anonymous Grifter. Like Taro, that's already a question to ask. Alright, Gabriel Petkov. Question, which is the last book you read? Well, depending on what you mean by fully read, if you count, like, say, listening to audiobooks from Audible as read, then the last one I read was Jim Powell's FDR's Folly. I finished that a few days ago. If you're looking for a physical book, I don't actually read physical books cover to cover much anymore. I usually just listen to, or I read the parts of the books I need for whatever video I'm working on. Garrett Allen asks, have you ever read The China Threat? It's about how China spies on America and focuses mainly on the Clinton administration during the 90s. I have not read The China Threat, but I've read and have other China books in my library. Oops. All right. Let's see. Elliot Rothblatt. Was any tech besides Caravelle necessary for Portuguese global span of control? The printing press? Well, that's hard to say. I mean, I'd say transportation was the most important thing needed for, yeah, so fast transportation is the most important thing needed for a global empire. Of course, that could be a, you know, double-edged sword. Fast enough to move troops across the ocean is good for keeping control of an empire. Too quickly, though, and reinforcements can reach the people you're trying to suppress. So, you know, yeah. Britboy, have you read The Story of Civilization by Will Durant? I have not. I've heard of it, but have not read it. Philip Budzik. Was, in your opinion, Bismarck even partly responsible for what happened in Germany during the next century? Well, Bismarck's folly was setting up a political system in Germany that was incredibly dependent upon him being in charge. It was like, unfortunately, lesser men than him gained control of Germany afterwards, and so they weren't able to handle the system properly. So, Kaiser Wilhelm II and the succeeding chancellors were not up to Bismarck's politicking game. Charlie Adams, was the British Empire good? It was good in some ways and not so good in others. I know that seems like a cop-out answer, but that's ultimately how most history is. It's monocausal or mono-resulting. Sort of monolithic results are just kind of not proper history, I think. All right, Ben, hope all is well. I enjoyed your collaboration with JJ on the history of political colors. Will you be doing any other future collaborations anytime soon? There are some in the work, but none of them are immediate in the future. Probably a month or so away at earliest at the moment. Mystic History, what is your response to tankies who call the Holodomor Nazi propaganda? I made 3 whole videos about that, and I'm kind of done with the question, to be honest. Alright, let's start with some of this. Alright, so the first book of cataloging here is called Albion's Seed. Albion's Seed for British Folkways in America by David Hackett Fisher. Let's see. The year published 1989. 1980. Nope. Go. That is in the American history section. And I'll look up all the archive.org URLs later. Let's see. Up next we have How Capitalism Saved America, the untold history of our country from the Pilgrims to the present, by Thomas J. DiLorenzo. Same author as author of The Real Lincoln. This is one of those books where if you traveled in certain libertarian or Tea Party circles back in the Obama years, you probably came across this book and his other works and places. 2004. And that is American history. And then we have, much older one. Puritanism in America. New Culture in a New World. By Larzer Ziff. Oh, dang, it's starting to fall apart, this one. Let's see. Published in 1973. Yeah, so a big chunk of my library I bought at a I buy from a local garage sale that opens up like 3 or 4 times a year. It's a garage sale that's just books. His entire garage, this guy, is just wall-to-wall books. He used to be a professor of political science at a local university, retired like a couple decades ago, and now he just has a stuffed library in his garage and sells books a few times a year. Though he hasn't been doing that as much during the pandemic. I think he's done it once in the last year. All right. The next is The Puritan Dilemma. The story of John Winthrop by Edmund S. Morgan. This was published in 1958. Okay, that's the oldest one so far. 1958. American history. And some more really old ones. So yeah, since I got since a lot of this library I bought from that garage sale, that means a lot of these books are older. And so a lot of them are probably out of date in terms of the information, but they are helpful in terms of like historiography. Colonial New England. Samuel Eliot Morison. Published in, oh wow. First edition is 1936. The second edition, which is this, was 1956. So, 1956. The Brit Boy asks, can I tell you if I recommend the book? If I really recommend it, I'll definitely tell you guys I'd recommend it. But at the moment, a lot of these are ones I haven't actually read yet. You know, I got them in large swaths years ago and haven't gotten a chance to read them. I used to be much bigger into alternate history. I, used to write alternate history on alternatehistory.com. And the idea I always had for a lot of these books was that I would use them as sources when writing alternate history. But that never really took off, and so now they're just kind of here. America before the Revolution. Before the Revolution. 1725 to 1775. By Alden T. Vaughn. Let's see. 1967. And then, the Russian America, the Great Alaskan Venture, 1741 to 1867, by Hector Chevigny, from the year 1965. All right, let's answer a few questions here. Let's see, Charlie Adams. It's not a cop-out, it's basically how history is. Yeah, okay. Let's see. Garrett Allen, Albion seed is dope. I've heard. It's an interesting thing, you know, basically how American culture in different parts of the country come from where in England different people came from. So the idea is that like people in northern England who are more Tory and therefore more like royalist and whatnot, very aristocratic, had it all sort of, it postulates that they moved to the south and therefore brought this aristocratic idea with them to the south, and which is why they like embraced slavery. Whereas in the north is where people from southern England who are all like Whigs and classical liberals and whatnot all moved up there. See, Didymus. Could what you said about the British Empire also be said about the USSR? It's harder to say that about the USSR. Because, I mean, the USSR just kind of increased suffering across the board, and most of the stuff that it ended up accomplishing would have happened without it. So that's just, you know, it's harder to say something like the USSR had positives and negatives. You know, I mean, you could say, oh, well, they granted women the right to vote. They did, but the United States also did so, like, right afterwards. So it's hard to say that they had much of an advantage when it comes to even those aspects. See, Marcus W. Turnbull, have you read War for the Holy Land by Thomas Asbridge? I have not. Gabriel Petkov, what do you think about the Crusades? We in the West overemphasize their importance because they were very important to the West, but they were less important to the Islamic world. Like for some reason we like to think of them as like as a predecessor or precursor to like colonialism and imperialism, but in reality it's not. They had nothing to do with it. That comes from a very Marxist reading of history, this idea that, oh, the second and third sons of noblemen who didn't inherit land had to go off to the Middle East to conquer lands for themselves, but that wasn't really the case. You know, it's like if someone says that they're physically risking their life for like a God-given mission, you should believe that's what they think. Let's see, Mr. Sands, what are your thoughts on Operation Just Cause? I don't think I know that at the top of my head. I don't think I know what Operation Just Cause is. Let's see. Yeah, so, Dick Justice, in your opinion, which ancient civilization is the greatest of all times? I don't know. Rome is nice, but Rome also, like, you know, I mean, Rome is the typical answer. I'd also might say like Davidic Israel maybe, but that's more for religious nepotism than anything else. Charlie Adams, what do you think of the French Revolution? Yeah. Which one? Of course, the first one you're probably thinking of, and that's, you know, I mean, it was good up to a certain point. After a certain point, it stopped being good. You know, they started getting head choppy. Connor Graves, what is up, bro? What is up yourself, Connor? What do you think of JJ McCullough? Well, you know, I like his content, you know, and I was, of course, in his one of his recent videos, so yeah, I wouldn't participate in something like that if I didn't like a person's content. I wouldn't do that. Christian Vibrecht, hello. Any idea why many people are fascinated by Prussia? I think lots of people are fascinated by just like kind of, I think one reason Prussia gets fascinated by a lot of people, especially in this online history community, is kind of like it's big alternate history fodder. Lots of people like it for that. It's this highly militarized society, so some people sort of see it like a precursor to the Nazis. I think that's another reason why people are interested in it, is because it's for the same reason they're interested in Nazis or similar reasons. Let's see. Gabriel Petkov. Any Christians celebrate Ramadan or Yom Kippur? Not really. You'll find some that might, but those are the more sort of Judaized Christianity. Like there are some sects of Christianity that think that Christians should be as Jewish as possible. You know, a lot of these tend to be the more apostolic kind of Christian groups, or like some fundamentalist types. You know, they tend to think, oh well, we'll hold up to all these things as well, even though that sort of explicitly contradicts like what St. Paul said in the New Testament. You know, like with the whole separation of the moral law and the ceremonial law. And the reason why, or I guess you're asking, can Christians celebrate Ramadan or Yom Kippur? Is that, oh, okay, it's can, not do, okay. Well, I mean, if you want to, you can celebrate whatever you want, but it's not really needed. Like Yom Kippur is like it's supposed to be a time of fasting, and it's one of the holidays in the Jewish calendar where you're supposed to like fast and pray for forgiveness. Well, for a Christian, that's not only is it not necessary, it's also in some ways sacrilegious, because to say that you have to pray on a certain holiday in order to obtain forgiveness kind of negates the purpose of the death and resurrection of Jesus. And Ramadan is just, we have no reason to celebrate it. So, yeah. And I guess I guess the real answer is I'd say Christians shouldn't be celebrating them because they're just because they have no spiritual reason for it. If they were secularized, you could, but I don't know how you would secularize Ramadan or Yom Kippur unless you turn them into gift-giving holidays. Let's see. Armia Karjova. I recently read a book called The Vanquished by Robert Gerwarth. It's about the immediate aftermath of the First World War. It's more of an introduction, really. Any books you'd recommend on this? Well, let's see. I have a couple books in my library that we probably won't get to today, judging by the speed we're going at, but I would say Neil Ferguson's War of the World is a good one, and also Paris 1919 is also pretty good for the immediate aftermath. All right, last question before I get back to the books. Gabriel Petkov, would you kill baby Hitler? The ability to kill baby Hitler implies like access to a time machine, and if I had a time machine, there's lots of things I could change, and killing baby Hitler would not be at the top of my list. Yeah, you'd go back way before then. So my usual answer to that question is no, because the ability to kill baby Hitler implies the ability to change him. All right, some more books. All right, the next we have. Oh, nope, not there. The French and Indian War, deciding the fate of North America, by Walter R. Bornemann. 2006. And I've read a bit of this book. It seems good. If you're looking for a solid, narrative history of the French and Indian War, this is definitely a good starting point. Let's see, next is an old one also. The colonial background of the American Revolution, by Charles M. Andrews. This is an older one here. Yeah, so this is 1924. Yeah, this is from 1924. if you take any if you take a U.S. history course, or if you take a history course, if you take a U.S. history course in college that focuses on, like, that puts a heavy emphasis on historiography, this is one of the books you'll definitely come across. I never actually read it, but I owned it. All right, this one, next one, West of the Revolution, an uncommon history of 1776 by Claudio Saunt. See, I think this is a newer book. Like, I think this one's come out like within the last 5 or 6 years, which is considered new in the world of history. Yeah, 2014. And I have not read this one, so I can't tell you. And that's going to be the case for a lot of these books. Most of these books I have not read, simply because there's just... it's easier to buy books than read them. Which is why I've slowed down on the buying of books in recent years. Let's see, this one. The Divided Ground, Indians, Settlers, and the Northern Borderland of the American Revolution by Alan Taylor. God. I haven't read the book, but I hate the physical manufacturing of it, because it's one of those that has like the tapered edges that make it look like it's an old book with uneven pages, but it costs more to make them like that, and they get annoying. So yeah, copyright 2006. All right. Let's see here. Next we have... all right, this should be a familiar author with you, for you, most of you. 1776 by David McCullough. And if I remember right, I think this one was published in 2006 by Simon & Schuster. And it was... no, 2005, okay. American history. All right, next is Struggle for Power, the American Revolution by Theodore Draper. Also another one that I can't recommend because I haven't read it. There are plenty of books that I can actively disrecommend, though they're not in my library because I don't really keep those around too much. Come on, Draper, where the hell did you put your publication date? There it is. 1996. See, Valley Forge, Pinnacle of Courage by John W. Jackson. Published 1992. Yeah, we've had that book in our like family library for years, and then that fell apart, and I took it. Let's see, next, Redcoats and Rebels. The American Revolution Through British Eyes by Christopher Hibbert. Another one I've been meaning to read, but just haven't gotten around to. Published in 1990. Ah, yes, this one. The Radicalism of the American Revolution by Gordon S. Wood. This is a good book. I would recommend this. If you've ever seen Good Will Hunting, this is a book that gets referenced in there, or at least the author does. From the Matt Damon character that you just want to punch, because he sounds like every insufferable college kid you've ever heard. All right, let's get back to a few more questions. Oh, okay, a lot came up, all right. All right, Charlie Adams, what song is playing? Well, you asked that a little while ago, so I don't know which one you're specifically referring to, but the one that's playing at this moment is called The Hagenswag by Andreas Dahlbach. It's on a chill playlist I have on Epidemic Sound. That is the current song we're listening to. Everything on this list will be instrumental stuff, so not getting lyrics in the way. All right. Let's see, Charlie Adams. What do you know about the 30 Years' War? The 30 Years' War, what I know about it is that it is far less about religion than the typical popular narrative would suggest, considering you have, like, Protestant Sweden siding with Catholic France against Catholic Austria, who's fighting with Protestant German states. I find it has very little to actually do with religion when you just look at how the alliances lined up. Lindsay Manning, what is your favorite flag and your least favorite? I'm not a vexillology guy. I used to be more into flags, but not so much anymore. So I don't really have a favorite. Let's see, Garrett Allen, what is your favorite alternate history that you made yourself? Well, the two most prominent alternate histories I ever wrote were one was called The Hero of Saratoga, the Presidency of Benedict Arnold, and the other was called A Long and Flowing Wig. The first one, of course, is a alternate history in which Benedict Arnold didn't betray the United States in the Revolution and then went on to become President of the United States after George Washington. And the other is a hypothetical in which the Whig Party survives longer due to William Henry Harrison not dying in office in his first 30 days. Or at least I think that's what it was. I wrote that one like, oh gosh, 2010. Yeah, that was back in community college, and that was a long time ago. But it had something to do with the Whig Party surviving longer. So yeah, Connor Graves, are you Catholic? No. I am a Lutheran of the Missouri Synod. So yeah, Didymus, do you agree with Bernard Lewis's distinction between capital A anti-Semitism, seeing Jews as a cosmic evil, and general bigotry against Jews? I've read a fair amount of Bernard Lewis's work, but I haven't read that specific piece yet. I've more been focusing on his history of Turkey stuff, because that's what I've used for like writing the Middle East history podcast that I have. I've used some of his works there. So I haven't read his stuff on anti-Semitism yet, though I think I have his book on anti-Semitism. I just haven't read it. Marcus W. Turnbull, accept him into the art school. Haha. Yeah, that's one thing you could do with Hitler. Dick Justice, who is greater conqueror in your opinion, Genghis Khan or Alexander the Great? Well, Genghis Khan conquered, of course, way more territory than Alexander the Great did. But then again, a lot of the territory he conquered was like vast, open, unpopulated landscapes, or landscapes that were mostly populated by other nomadic groups. So on a map it looks more impressive, but when you look at it in detail, it's a lot less impressive. So I think Alexander the Great is actually more impressive considering he's conquering actual people, whereas Genghis Khan was mostly conquering empty space. Mystic History, thoughts on Howard Zinn? He was a bad historian. See ya, Garrett Allen. Have you read Pax Americana? I don't think I have. I'm familiar with the phrase, but I don't think I've read the book. That's about how smallpox affected the American Revolution and life in colonial world. Yeah, no, I have not read that. Kevin E. If World War III were to occur today, what countries do you think would be allies and which would be Axis? I don't know. The current landscape is complicated. Like you'd think, oh, well, it's the United States and NATO and its close allies, except NATO I've never felt like was a super reliable alliance, mostly because, like, if the moment ever came for it to actually be needed, that being, war with Russia, I have a feeling a good chunk of Europe, especially Western Europe, would kind of just cave into the Russians. Since, most of Europe, especially Western Europe, just aren't in the mood for war anymore. And so if push came to shove, I think most of them would just kind of disappear. They would just try to go neutral. See ya, Philip Budzik. Do you think that the genocide of Native Americans could be prevented? I'm not just referring to the U.S., of course, excluding epidemic stuff. Well, the thing is that there's still a debate over whether or not what happened to, like, the American Indians can be called genocide. That is still a debate. It's a defensible position to refer to it as genocide, I think, but it's not the phrase I would use. Genocide often implies a one-sided conflict. At least that's sort of what it implies oftentimes. And for the first, 100 years or so, the conflict between, European settlers in the Americas and the American Indians wasn't one-sided. It was pretty even for, the first century. And so I think it's a lot more complicated. And so that's discussions of that, whether or not it could be prevented, kind of get hard to do that. And so I would say for Native Americans, the only way it could be prevented is if, Native American societies were more like technologically developed when the Europeans arrived. Either that or they need, diseases that the Europeans couldn't combat, like how Like in Africa, one of the reasons why the Europeans didn't really colonize Africa really quickly is because Africa had lots of diseases that the Europeans couldn't deal with. And so they just never went farther in than the coastlines. So yeah, it's a complicated subject and an ongoing debate. Lindsay Manning, what books would you not recommend? Well, most stuff by Howard Zinn I wouldn't recommend, or at least I definitely wouldn't recommend it in a vacuum. Like, if you're going to read Howard Zinn, you should also read, like, the Patriots' History of the United States, mostly because you'll get such a glaring difference. Though I have to say, if I had to compare, like, a Patriots' History of the United States versus a People's History of the United States, I would actually say that a Patriots' History of the United States is probably better scholarship, to be completely honest, out of the two of them. It's more balanced. Let's see. Gabriel Petkov, favorite music album? I almost never listen to music by album anymore. I mean, the easiest, throwaway answer would be something from the Beatles, be it your White Album, Rubber Soul, or like Sgt. Pepper's or whatnot. Those are the lazy but also the most honest answers. Let's see, Mitchell Turisi, do you know any good books on the party flip? Not at the moment. I'm sure there are books. Like, I don't think there are any books. I haven't come across many that are dedicated to the subject. There are books that talk about it. There are books that talk about it, but the book isn't dedicated to it. And because of that, they tend to give it a little, I think, short shrift, because the party switch is a lot more complicated than anyone likes to think, because, like you have something, it didn't happen at all, because look, like none of the politicians that were, racist Southern Democrats most of them didn't switch to becoming Republicans. And then you have the other side saying like, oh, well, it's like, well, it's not that the racist Southerners all just switched over to the Republican Party or something. It's a lot more complicated. It's not as simple as either of them, because here's the thing. You look at what Republicans were actually saying when campaigning in the South, like starting in the 60s, and they weren't explicitly targeting, racial animus. It wasn't like, yeah, those Democrats are gotten soft on them darkies, so we're going to get hard on them for you. It's like, no, they weren't doing that. So I don't know any good books I would recommend at the moment, but that is something I'm going to be looking into at some point in the future. Let's see. Carrot Beans. What genres do you have under the section header? Well, right now it's just American history, because I'm pulling off of the bookcase that is all American history, because what this process is doing right now is cataloging the books, as in I'm going through the library and just writing them down here, so that way I know what books I have at any time, so that way if I'm like at a used bookstore or a garage sale, I don't end up accidentally buying an extra copy of a book, because I've done that before. Because like I remember at one point, like the book from Samuel P. Huntington's Clash of Civilizations, I remember I bought that book like 3 different times, because I ended up buying like 3 different editions because they all had different covers, but the contents of the books were basically exactly the same. So that's the purpose of it. And so under the section header right now, it's just American history. After the American history section, we'll probably get to the European history section, assuming I can get through it at the speed we're going now. Let's see, all right, one more question, then back to cataloging. How important do you predict or think COVID-19 will be in the historical perspective in the future, if at all? it's going to heavily depend on how the next couple years go, because there are some things obviously that'll be cultural changes that'll happen. You know, working from home, working or going to school from home will be more normalized if not everyone wants to continue doing it. We're going to see more people going, we're going to see fewer kids or a fewer percentage of kids in public schooling, because some parents who wanted their kids to go to an in-person class have started sending their kids to private schools and to various other educational options. So some of those things. And so those are some of the things that we're going to have to keep an eye on. Otherwise, the next few years could change how it happens radically. And of course, how we look at it a decade or more from now is completely different than how we see it now. And from now, back to cataloging. All right. See, oh, looks like the music stopped. Okay, that started back up again. The chill list is not very long. So you're going to be hearing some of that again. All right. The American Heritage. Oh, not typing up. What's happening here? There it goes. The American Heritage Book of the Revolution by Bruce Lancaster and J.H. Plum. Oh, hold on. Forgot to get the date for that one. 1958. Nope, not 1058. 1958, American history. The meaning of the American Revolution by Dan Lacey. Published by Mentor Books in 1964. I got a couple newer ones here. American Creation, The Triumphs and Tragedies at the Founding of the Republic by Joseph J. Ellis. (2007). And we had the first repeat author, Founding Brothers, The Revolutionary Generation, also by Joseph J. Ellis. This one published in 2008. This book ended up on a lot of Tea Party reading lists, I remember. All right, next comes The Glorious Cause, The American Revolution, 1763 to 1789. by Robert Middlekauff. Published in 1982. Part of the Oxford History of the United States series. Next, the South in the Revolution, 1763 to 1789, by John Richard Alden. Published in 1976. George Washington and Benedict Arnold. A Tale of Two Patriots by Dave R. Palmer. Published in 2006. Next, ratification. The people debate the Constitution. 1787 to 1789. Or no, 1788. Dang it, fingers. By Pauline Maier. Published in 2010. This book is one that I actually highly recommend. You can see it here. This is, Ratification, the People Debate the Constitution, 1787 to 1788, by Pauline Maier. I highly recommend this one. It is very good, especially if you're looking for, stuff about the Constitutional Convention and the debates around the Constitution, especially, how the Constitution was debated at the state level, not just in Philadelphia. So it's very interesting for that stuff. I highly recommend it if you're an American history guy. Next, Triumvirate. The story of the unlikely alliance that saved the Constitution and united the nation, by Bruce Chadwick. Published in 2009. I have not read this book, but I remember buying it at my local Barnes & Noble. It was in their discounted section. That was back in a time where it's like, oh, a book about American history, discounted, sign me up. All right, the next, The Great Rehearsal. The story of the making and ratifying of the Constitution of the United States, by Carl Van Doren. Published by Penguin in 1948. Yeah. 1948. And a brilliant solution inventing the American Constitution by Carol Birkin. And published in 2002. All right, that's the first shelf. So I need to go put these books back on the shelf and pull out another one. All right. All right, let's answer a couple questions and then back to the books. See, Carrot Beans, how many books in your library? I have no idea. That's actually part of the reason I'm doing this. Is that by the time I've listed them all out, it will also give me a number. Alex Winter, do you feel as though people treat religion unfairly? It depends on the environment. it definitely depends on the environment, I think. There's this sort of idea that, like, oh, like giving a religious justification for something is almost seen as an illegitimate reason for doing something. Like, say, like there's some like sex ed YouTubers out there like Lindsay Doe who has talked about like, it's like, there's plenty of reasons to abstain from sex, but if one of them is religion, that's an illegitimate reason. Or like, why do you oppose certain social policies? Like, well, my religion says it's against it. It's like, well, that's not a legitimate reason to have an opinion. And so I think that's how modern society treats religion unfairly. It's that they treat religious reasons for not wanting to do something or to do something as illegitimate. It's like, well, it's one thing if you wanted to do that for a different reason, but because you want to do it because your imaginary sky man tells you to, well, I think that's bad. That's how religion is unfairly treated, I think. Carrot Beans, how many books do you find optimum reading at once? Well, it depends on what I'm reading them for. Like, if I'm reading them for research, like for something for school, or nowadays it's for videos, I can read multiple at once. But if I'm reading something for pleasure, it's usually one at a time. Or if I'm reading something for specific information, it's usually one at a time as well. Like, I started reading A Random Walk Down Wall Street in order to get some investment advice, and I think it's better to just read one of those at a time. Didymus, aren't you Jewish? No, I am not Jewish. Lots of people in the comments think I'm Jewish. I don't know why. I don't have any particularly Jewish features, I think. But no. Nella Possessed. Hi. Well, hello back, Nella. Let's see, Carrot Beans, where do you find the most book recommendations from? I don't know. I don't really look for book recommendations anymore. Or at least if I do, I get them from like fellow like educational creators. Otherwise, when I'm looking for something, I'll either go straight to Amazon or like Archive, or the Internet Archive, and just look up a subject and find it. Sometimes I hear about a good book on like a podcast or something, if it's something I'm interested in. But otherwise, I don't look for suggestions too often. Let's see. And I think that's about... Alright, I think I'll get back to the books, because I'm only supposed to be here until 3 o'clock, and it's already 2:09. So I need to get back to, back to the books. Let's see here. Knights of the Golden Circle. Secret Empire. Southern Secession. Civil War. By David C. Keene. I think this is probably published in like 2015, is it? No, 2013. The Field of Blood. Violence in Congress and the Road to Civil War. By Joanne B. Freeman. Let's see here. Boop a doop boop boop boo. let's see. Let me give you guys a better look at this. Okay, I think I give you guys a better look at the list. Alright, next is Team of Rivals. The Political Genius of Abraham Lincoln. By Doris Kearns Goodwin. Oh gosh, I remember this came out like during the Bush era, I think, so I think it's probably either 2005 or 2006. I remember her being interviewed on like Daily Show or Colbert Report back then, and yeah, 2005. I have not read the book. I've read other books by Doris Kearns Goodwin, but not this one. Next, Bear Flag Rising, the Conquest of California, 1846. By Dale L. Walker. Copyright 1999. Gold Rush Politics. California's first legislature. By Mary Jo Ignofo. Copyright 1999. American history. The world rushed in. The California Gold Rush experience. By J.S. Holiday. (1981). The presidencies of Zachary Taylor and Millard Fillmore. By Albert B. Smith. (1988). Devil's Gate. Brigham Young and the Great Mormon Hand Cart Tragedy. By David Roberts. Published in 2008. and the freedom of thought struggle in the Old South. Revised and enlarged edition by Clement Eaton. Harper, published by Harper Torch Books in 1940. But now the new material is from 1964, so I should probably put 1964. All right, I'm gonna put this stack back on the shelf real quick. All right, I'll take a couple questions. See, Dicka Blastbeat. Are you able to read other languages than English? And if not, what language would you like to learn to help expand your academic scopes? I don't know how much I could actually read in another language. Like, the only language I could read somewhat is German, and even then only with like a dictionary next to me. I can speak a little German, but otherwise I can't really read much in a foreign language. German would be helpful if I could read it properly, but I don't know. I don't know what I would want to read if I could read in a foreign language. I mean, if I learned like a Chinese language, like either Mandarin or Han, or like dang it, I know there's the other one, Han or Mandarin, it would probably open up the most doors. Otherwise, Carrot Beans, what is your approach to reading a historical subject like the Ottoman Empire? I just read a bunch of secondary sources in English. That's my approach. I have a handful of books on Turkish and Ottoman history in my library. They tend to be pretty good, so I just go back to them over and over again. I wish I had a more concrete example for you. Blood Honey, why not use a home library cataloging platform like Library Thing? I don't do that because one, I didn't know it existed, but two, this is also it's just as simple, and I can share it with as many people as I want without much struggle. Gabriel Petkoff, do you know what happened to Hannibal after Zama? And if you do, what would have happened if the Seleucid king allowed him to command troops instead of navy? No idea. Fahad Hussein, hi from LA, CH. Well, hello there, Fahad. Mystic History, what do you think of the history YouTube channel Oversimplified? I don't really watch them. I'm not subscribed to Oversimplified, and that's about it. I've seen some of their videos. It's okay, but you know, it's the quick talking meme form of history, and it's good for a lot of people. I don't really watch it much myself. Fahad Hussein, what's your take on the Israeli election happening now? Like everyone else, I just wish they would, finish it. Like, and this is one of the problems, of course, with a parliamentary system. Because like I have videos about like presidential democracies versus parliamentary democracies, and this is one of the problems with parliamentary democracies, that it's this ability to have like endless elections. And so that's one of the issues with it. I don't know whether or not Netanyahu is guilty. Haven't looked deeply enough in it to come to a conclusion myself. He's done some good things, but clearly when you're in power for that long, some corruption's going to come into the mix. All right, one more question. From Carrot Beans, what is your approach to reading a historical topic? Do you prefer beginning with an overview history, or would you rather being thrown in the deep end? I think for most history, it's more useful to get like a general overview first, just so you have sort of the big picture context, and then to dive in deeper. So yeah, start general and get deeper is my recommendation, especially if you're going into a subject you don't have too many, if you don't have too much familiarity with it first. All right, back to the books. All right, we got another book from Gordon Wood here, Empire of Liberty, a history of the early republic, 1789 to 1815. Gordon S. Wood. Published in 2009. This book I can also highly recommend. This is from the Oxford History of the United States series. It is the follow-up to that The Glorious Cause by Middlekauff, which I've also read. And I highly recommend it. All right. Joseph Story and the American Constitution by James McClellan. Published in 1971. Liberty and Power, the Politics of Jacksonian America by Harry L. Watson. $19.90. Here's one. Zion on the Mississippi. Zion on the Mississippi. The settlement of the Saxon Lutherans in Missouri, 1839 to 1841. By Walter O. Forster. By Concordia Publishing House in 1953. So yeah, so this was one of the books I used in my History of Lutherans in America video. Zion on the Mississippi. Mr. Jefferson's Lost Cause. Land, farmers, slavery, and the Louisiana Purchase. By Roger G. Kennedy. (2003) from Oxford. Glorious Misadventures. Nikolai Rezanov and the Dream of a Russian America by Owen Matthews. (2013). Founding rivals. Madison versus Monroe. The Bill of Rights. And the election that saved a nation. Chris DeRose. This is another book I found in the Barnes & Noble bargain section. 2011. Let's see. And this one, Thomas Jefferson and the Tripoli Pirates. The Forgotten War That Changed American History by Brian Kilmeade and Don Yeager. Yeah, this is the same author who wrote George Washington's Secret Six. Yeah, in fact, I think this copy is autographed. I bought it at Barnes & Noble years ago, and I believe, yep, it's an autographed copy. I've read this. It's pretty good. If you're looking for a nice narrative history on the Barbary Wars, it's pretty nice. I actually have a script written for like a even wider context Barbary Wars video that's been sitting in my Google Drive for a couple of years now, and I just haven't had the chance to refine it and make it video makeable. Plus, every time I think about finally making the video, someone else in the history community puts out a video about the subject area, and it's like, well, damn it, now I need to wait. All right, now I'm going to put those books away real quick. All right, let's take a couple questions here. See, Gabriel Petkov, do you think the education system should be changed? I should. I do. I think it should be changed. There are lots of things that need to be changed. People talk about, oh, we need to make college free. I'm like, why don't we ask why is college so expensive before we start throwing money at a system. It's like, maybe it's not doing its job well, and I don't think it is. Like, here's a radical idea I have for reforming higher education. Why does a history major need to take any upper division, like, science courses? Like, at all? Why do they need to take science courses at all, for that matter? Because, like, I have a bachelor's degree, and a majority of the classes I took in college to get that degree were not history courses. Instead, they were basically just making you get a liberal... They're basically... The American educational system right now tries to force a liberal education. By liberal, I don't mean politically liberal, but rather like, you know, liberal studies type liberal into every degree. And it's like, that just makes it more expensive and it makes it take longer. Like, I'm not very good at math, especially anything above like pre-algebra I'm not good at. And so every math class I had to take in college, I had to retake. So yeah, I've taken math courses a total of 7 times in college, and that was for 3 courses. One I had to take 3 times, and the other 2 I had to take twice. Wasn't very good. It was holding me back from moving on to a full 4-year university. Not a good time. Not a good time. Especially if you're going to school back during the Great Recession, where everyone was suddenly going back and you couldn't get the classes you needed. So I am one of those who thinks in higher education, we can make higher education cheaper if we get rid of all the unnecessary fluff that you have to take along with your regular courses. So once again, if you want to get a degree in history, all you need are history courses. If you wanted to get a degree in biology, all you need are biology and relevant science courses, etc., for every subject. That would make college a lot cheaper. You could cut down the number of classes the person has to take in half. And sometimes it makes you think, you know, it sounds like there are certain courses out there that no one would take if they didn't have to. And so by forcing students to take these extra courses, you're just kind of, you know, artificially stimulating a particular subject matter in school. Yeah, I could make a video about this, but I just haven't taken the time. Carrot Beans, are you big on e-readers like Kindle or Kobo? I don't have a Kindle. I have, in fact, I'm the weird guy who always went for the Nook instead of the Kindle. But I have nothing against e-readers. I use them sometimes. But as you could tell from this video, and if you could see my library from here, I have a lot of books. And so it depends on what I'm researching. I tend to prefer to have like a hard copy of a book. But I have nothing against them. I've gone off and on and using them more or less. The problem I have with e-readers is large part because I do a lot of my reading towards the end of the day. And because of that, use reading on a screen, like basically plays tricks with your circadian rhythm and makes it harder to fall asleep at night. And so because of that, I prefer to read hard copies since I do most of my reading in the evenings. Petkov, how would you feel 80 years from now when the things you've liked through become part of history, but the parts you've lived through, when the parts you've lived through become part of the history books? Well, part of that's already happened. I mean, we're already seeing, we're seeing the 90s are suddenly getting talked about a lot now as, here's the thing you'll learn when you pay attention, when you live long enough and pay attention. You'll find basically every decade, suddenly a new past decade is the source of all our problems. Like back in the 2010s, people started saying, did you know when all of our problems right now actually started? They started in the 1980s. And the 2020s have just started, and now suddenly everyone's talking about the 90s. Like, hey, did you know that the 90s are what actually caused our current problems right now? And this is something you're going to see. Basically, whatever decade you're living in, all of our current problems started 30 years earlier. That's how you're going to see it. And in some cases, it's legitimate. And other times, it's just, a new generation has suddenly become more prominent. And now they're recontextualizing the present in terms of their experience in life. It's similar to how in pop culture, how like, once again in the 2010s, we saw a lot of retreads from the 1980s. All right, let's get back to work. American Leviathan. Empire, Nation, and Revolutionary Frontier. Patrick Riffin. Published 2007. Let's get the tunes back up. The beginnings of American foreign policy. To the farewell address. Felix Gilbert. Another Harper Torch book. 1961. Adams versus Jefferson. The tumultuous election of 1800 by John Ferling. This is another 2000s book, I remember. 2004, yeah. A magnificent catastrophe. The tumultuous election of 1800. America's first presidential campaign by Edward J. Larson. (2007). The first Congress. How James Madison, George Washington, and a group of extraordinary men invented the government by Fergus M. Bordwich. I think this is 2015, if I had to guess at the top of my head. 2016. Yeah. The Whiskey Rebellion. George Washington. Alexander Hamilton and the frontier rebels who challenged America's newfound sovereignty by William Hodgland. (2006). American history. And ooh, I like this one. Liberty's Exiles. American Loyalists in the Revolutionary World. By Maya Jasanoff. (2011). And I think this is the last book we're going to be cataloging for today because I planned on ending this stream at 3. So the last book here, The Exchange Artist. A tale of high-flying speculation and America's first banking collapse. By Jane Kamensky. Where are you? Copyright info. Should be here. There you are. (2009). All right, yeah. So I think that'll be the last of the books we're cataloging today, since I spent a lot of time answering questions. And so I'm going to spend the rest of this time answering your questions now. So let's get back to the questions. All right. Nilla Possessed. Your opinion on Jill Leoprez's These Truths. I haven't read it, so I can't give a informed opinion. DC Guy 3. I'm just that schmuck who buys too many books if they're on sale, then uses the excuse, I need these, you see. Very important historian things, I swear. I feel attacked. It's like, sorry, I see myself in this picture and I don't like it. Untag me. Alright. Garrett Allen, your alternate history on Benedict Arnold sounds interesting. From what I know, he was shafted multiple times for people less competent. That did happen, but then again, like, what you read, like, one of the Benedict Arnold book, like, I had a twin biography of Benedict Arnold and George Washington I just, went back through earlier. And yes, they point out that he was shafted, but then again, so is George Washington. And George Washington didn't betray the country. So that's sort of the big difference between the two of them. Is that lots of people what happened to Benedict Arnold, that happened to a lot of people. But they didn't betray the country. Yeah, so Samajin, what is your stance on the contemporary motivation and effectivity of dropping the bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki? I think it was necessary. Unfortunate, but necessary. I mean, these were people who were, once again, Japan was filled with people who were suicidally fighting for the emperor. The idea that you could beat him without something like that seems just rather ludicrous. Let's see. Carrot Bean suggestion: add a binding header on the spreadsheet softcover, hardback, leatherback, PDF. Why, you ask? Well, yeah, well, this list here is all just hardcovers, so I'm not bothered doing something like that. Alex Winter: I was more thinking about how most people see religion as being primitive and something to brainwash people. I mean, I think that's also part of the idea of what I was saying earlier, how religion is viewed as religious reasoning for what you're doing is seen as illegitimate. And the thing is that it's seen as selectively illegitimate. Like, Joe Biden comes out and says, "Oh, my Catholicism makes me want to create this massive welfare state and have intrusive environmental policies into the federal government." It's like, yes, Joe Biden, but you're a Catholic. Doesn't the Catholic Church also condemn, abortion and homosexuality? And yet your administration is supporting both of these things. It doesn't sound like you're being very Catholic. It's like, well, I can't force my values on people. It's like, you didn't mind forcing these other values you have on people. So it sounds like you're just being selective, It's like, you're enforcing your religion when it happens to match your politics. So yeah. Charlie Adams: what do you think of nationalism? Nationalism, I think, is a necessary but dangerous spice in civil society. A little bit is good. A little bit is helpful. It can get people to, move and act, but too much, ends up spoiling the dish. So I'd say a little bit of nationalism is helpful. More than that, it becomes problematic. See, Mystic History: why are you putting the archive link? Well, the purpose of the archive link is I'm going to go through this list later and go through archive.org and put links to the different books from archive.org there. And the reasoning for this is that if I ever need to, say, get rid of a bunch of books for some reason, like, say, I'm moving, or I'm just looking to, doing some minimalism and I need to downsize the number of things I own, well, I'm going to want to do that with books, and I would prioritize getting rid of books that I have access to elsewhere. And archive.org is a place where I can have access to a bunch of books for free. So that's why. Mystic, alright, Carrot Beans: what, in your opinion, were the predominant factors that propelled some empires of antiquity, i.e. the Mongols, the Arabs, amongst others, to have such a meteoric or expansionist rise? Well, I think a lot of it is because a lot of the ones that have, or at least the examples you've given, like the Mongols and the Arabs were people who were living in largely nomadic areas. There are large swaths of territory that could be conquered easily, and by being conquered easily, that simply means, you can claim it and no one's really going to challenge you too much for it. That was sort of the advantage that empires like the Mongols and the Arabs had. Mystic History: was George B. McClellan really as incompetent as Oversimplifies portrays him to be? Well, he had numerous chances to defeat Robert E. Lee and possibly end the war early. Whether or not that's due to incompetence, I don't know. I haven't seen Oversimplified's video on the Civil War or McClellan, if that's what it is, so I can't tell you. See, Magic: any plans for another group live stream with history YouTubers? We've talked about it. We like the idea, we just don't have anything specific to do. All the past live streams with the history tubers have all been something happened, Like the last time, it was when the 1776 Commission was announced, when the Patriotic Education Initiative was announced, and then when the 1776 report was released. Let's see. Carrot Beans, is universal socialism inevitable? I don't think it's inevitable. At least depends on what you think by inevitable. Because, like, could it happen? I guess, but I don't think it would last forever or for long. Yeah, I just don't think it'll last for long. I think that's the ultimate problem with socialism, is that we don't really have an example of long-term, like, top-down mandated socialism surviving very long. So it's kind of hard to think that. And if you're going to try to have, bottom-up socialism, once again, if an individual community decides they don't want to be socialist anymore, that tends to weaken all the other socialist communities. So I really don't think it has the ability to last for long. Now, how long is up for discussion. Sam Patton, blaming boomers for everything wrong? That's right. We shouldn't blame boomers for everything. In fact, a lot of the stuff that we blame boomers for is actually the fault of their parents. The greatest generation. Yeah, a lot of the stuff we blame them for is actually done by their parents, and they simply inherited what their parents did. Plus, nowadays Gen Z has done this weird thing that a lot of older people did for millennials, and that is a lot of things like in the last decade, that the word millennial became just kind of a catch-all term for young people. And now Gen Zers are doing the same thing with boomer. Using boomer as just a catch-all phrase for old people. And even then, the whole boomer versus millennial, or boomer versus Gen Z fight is not an actual fight between baby boomers and Gen Z. It's actually a fight between Gen Z and their parents, Gen X. So yeah, Major Jules, how would you identify on the political spectrum? On the political compass, which I think the compass is a useful visualization tool, but the tests that usually go with it aren't very good. I usually put myself in the lower right quadrant, so right libertarian is usually the area I'm in. Alex Winter, have you ever tried frozen custard? Maybe. Carrot Beans, what are your thoughts on reading a book on the same subject but years apart? Example, World War I. Do you think the literature most recently produced would be better than produced in, let's say, the 1960s? For the most part, yes, actually. Because you see, historians have gotten much better at preserving sources over time. Yeah, historians have gotten much better at preserving historical sources over time. And so, as time goes on, we have more information. Not only can we look at how the original primary sources were interpreted 50 years ago, we can then reinterpret that with new information that has come out. So yes, I think it would be better in terms of, just accuracy. Alex Winter, do millennials and Gen Z not understand what defines generations is to change within a few years? Well, this isn't just a problem with millennials and Gen Z. I'd say Gen X and baby boomers also made this mistake with just using the word millennial as just a catch-all term for young people. So yeah, this isn't just one side issue. The word millennial got thrown around so much in the last decade that when there finally was a generation of young people who weren't millennials by technical definition, they didn't know what to call them. So they just continued calling them even younger millennials. All right. Major Jules, okay, I lean further left, but I won't judge you on your opinions. Well, opinions are fine to judge people on. It's just, do those opinions impact how they treat people? That's, yeah, I think the important thing. Carthaean Sylvangam. Sorry, I'm butchering that name. With the direction the world is heading towards, with automation, robots, etc., do you think socialism UBI is the only solution? I don't know what the solution is. Because the problem is that, you know, what they're often talking about is like a world that's like Star Trek. It's a post, you know, scarcity world where basically there is a total government control over all the economics. It's like, I don't know how you get from one to the other without destroying civilization in between. So I don't know what the ultimate solution is. I don't think so. It'll be socialism, but I don't know what it is. Gilgamesh's Warcat. Howdy, hope everyone is doing good. Have you heard of the peaceful divorce theory regarding the US? If so, what are your thoughts? If by peaceful divorce theory you're referring to the American Revolution, I don't know. I've always been more of a benign neglect theory for the American Revolution myself, as in the American colonies were sort of neglected by the home country for so long that when they finally decided to reassert authority, it's like a parent who's been gone for most of a child's life suddenly coming back into it and then demanding the same authority of a parent that's been there the whole time. So that's been my pet theory for that. Alex Winter, when I say change, I meant change in political views, humor, taste, etc. media. Yeah, things will change. I get it. Yeah. Alright, well guys, it's about 3 o'clock now, so I think I'm going to end the live stream here. Thank you all for taking the time. I think I'll do I'm definitely going to have another live stream next week, since I don't have a regular video ready yet. And in that live stream, we are going to be watching more anti-communist propaganda. So, I hope you guys will enjoy that. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next week.